Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Connor and Mike Simmons, but for the first time ever, we've got double guests. We've got Christy Walters and Jeff Bajorek from the Why and the Buy podcast. Mike, give us an introduction to Christy and Jeff.
So, Jody, I met Jeff originally just through Twitter chats and following him on some things that he was posting on LinkedIn, then started to listen to the podcast. After that, he and Christy and Mike and I connected, had a couple of really good conversations and thought it would be great to have them here on the Catalyst Sale podcast.
So is this going to be like a dance off?
Do you have your dancing shoes on?
I mean, I can go get them if this is going to require dance moves.
Well, here's the thing. This podcast is audio only. We do not have video. So
yes,
dance off probably isn't going to work. We're going to have to level up.
Yep. Video here.
Christy and Jeff, I'm not sure if you knew that's what you were walking into, an audio only dance off.
Hey, we like it. Hey, and when you come on our podcast, we do video.
Well, and I can tell you,
bring your dancing shoes, Mike. It's all good.
All right.
An audio-only dance-off happens to be the only dance-off I participate in. And I win every time. But that's this is home turf for me, as far as I'm concerned.
Jeff, we are aligned.
I knew it. Well, thank you for having us. This is cool to be here.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. Now, why don't we start with really the softball question, which is a little bit about yourselves, maybe focus on the podcast first, and then get into how you guys met each other.
Well, I think those two things are kind of aligned, actually. I'll let Christy tell the story because she does so well, but I think we can probably answer both of those questions with one answer.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So Jeff and I are both sales coaches and trainers, and we actually met in the offices of Buy in Charlotte, North Carolina a couple of years ago. And those of you who don't know what Buy is, that is the company started by Jeffrey Gitomer, who wrote the Little Red Book of Selling. And Jeff and I just started having these fabulous conversations about growing our businesses. We were both just getting started in building up a small business, and some of the pitfalls that we were hitting and challenges that we were facing were the same. And so we were talking those through on the phone. And at one point we said, well, how do people get to know us that don't already know us, right? So we have our networks and that's great, but we really don't want to just be confined to what we've always done. So we said, gosh, it would be great if we could just record these phone calls and let people listen. So that's kind of what we do. We record our phone calls and let people listen.
Well, and we talked a lot about creating content and writing and how writing gets the wheels turning, and it allows you to the internet allows for a long tail. And as much as Snapchat and everything is what have you done for me lately, for us to be able to put a stamp down or to make a mark and put that someplace for people to find it when they do go looking for us, writer's block happens, talker's block rarely does. So when we can have these conversations and go back and forth, there's a lot of really good ideas that come up organically. And now you've got a means of recording those ideas, sharing them with other people. And then when you go back and listen to some of this stuff, there's a lot of things that will give you a lot of cues that'll give you topics to write about and to explore. And also then to have the interactivity of having guests on, to have you guys on later on, and to have some of the other people. We've had several guests in common on each of our podcasts too. It's a way to share common ground, let alone a way to connect with people. You know, you can give some of your customers a voice to your audience. You can give some of your prospects a voice to your audience. You get a real feel for not only who you are, but it's an open forum for discussion. And podcasting is too easy not to do. It seems really intimidating, but I mean, look, with a Blue Yeti microphone and a laptop and a webcam, I mean, you're there and you're running. You're not as good as what Jody Mayberry can produce for you, but you can get something out there. And the enemy of good is perfect sometimes. So if you're waiting for perfect, you're going to wait forever. Do something, get it out there, and put plant a stake in the ground as a place to start. And that's what we've done, and we're seeing it grow. It's really kind of fun.
Jody, I feel like every time we have someone on here, there's another reason why they're trying to get you out of a job. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of feeling for you, Jody.
Well, so I just take the hits as they come.
But that's not it. Once you take it seriously enough to where, Christy and I, with our own series and in our own podcast, we've decided to take additional steps and have someone do some of the production. And we've taken some cues from some professionals. And I look back at our first few episodes and they're not good, but they were good enough at the time. And we're producing stuff that's so much better, not only from an audio quality standpoint, but from our own conversational quality and the ideas that we come up with and the way that we can speak. This has been a learning process for us. And it's also been a development process. And if we weren't willing to just start, even with rudimentary equipment, we'd never have gotten to the place where we're going today. So only call Jody when you're serious and you have money to invest. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's a pretty good recovery.
Yes.
You guys started with the partnership and this common ground and sharing of stories where you were running into challenges and realizing, I'm sure Jeff on your end, realizing you're not the only one running into this, and Christy going through that same experience. And Mike and I have had that same experience over and over again. And you get into this whole discussion around the podcast and how you learn as you go through. So what are some of the experiences you've learned as you've both built out your businesses and work with other customers that you think would be good to share with the Catalyst Sale podcast audience in the context of the why and the buy?
Well, I think you just summed it up, Mike. I mean, I think what you and Mike have together as partners is a good illustration of it as well. And that's that we don't have to walk this path alone, right? And as small business owners and solopreneurs, oftentimes that's exactly what I find. Most of my clients are small business owners or solopreneurs, and they really struggle with the isolation that comes with owning your own business and feeling like everything is heavy. I got into this because I'm good at this one thing. But by the way, all this business stuff is heavy and it takes up way more of my time than the thing I got into business for in the first place. And so I think having Jeff as a sounding board has been crucial to helping me get unstuck in those moments in my business and being able to bring on other thought leaders, authors, speakers, you name it, people who are just successful in what they do, and seeing that everybody struggles through some of the same things. You're not alone in this process. That has probably been the biggest element for me. And then I think the other piece of that is that this has been such an incredible marketing tool for our business. It really has been a way for people who didn't know who I was, or maybe just maybe we had met briefly or we had met through friends. They had never encountered me in the business setting, and knowing how I interact, what my thought process is and what my philosophy is, I could never explain that in a series of 4 or 5 phone calls with them. This is a great way for them to pick and choose the things that are most important to them. So it really has just been phenomenal.
Well, for me, it's been really encouraging since the beginning because we can see our growth as presenters, as speakers, as coaches, as trainers. I still struggle with what to call myself, but seeing the growth and the development of it, and seeing people respond to reposts of old episodes and to send me messages and say, I'm totally picking up what you're laying down. That episode changed the way I think. And for me to say, wow, you picked that up from that episode? Hold on, wait, the new stuff's so much better. Like, just kind of stay with it, but not losing the point that as someone just starting out in a world where everybody calls themselves an expert, what makes me different? What makes me stand out? Well, there's a lot of things that, and salespeople especially, can't always put their finger on what makes them different. So having the courage to just get started and starting to put it out there, and then seeing what resonates with people. And when they get back to you, I mean, you walk taller for the rest of the day. You read that positive comment, and we turn comments off on our blog because it's all spam, really, more often than not. But when you post an episode, when someone tweets me or they send me a message on LinkedIn, wow, that episode was really impactful. That is really rewarding, and it lets you know you're on the right track. And to me, the voice of the customer and the voice of the audience kind of coming back, that has been just a tremendous encouragement for me to keep going and continue going along the path that just feels right to me. But hey, who knows if it's right for anybody else?
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson learned that I think we sort of uncovered early on as well, which was in the beginning, we had this idea of the content that we wanted to share, the things that we wanted to talk about. And to some extent, I think we overthought a lot of the things that we wanted to talk about. Mm-hmm. And what's been interesting is getting feedback from people that do listen to the podcast regularly. And there are things that we'll say that maybe we take for granted, or we just think, oh, yeah, who's really going to get value out of that? Like sometimes I'll listen to the recordings before we push them live. And I'll think, wow, is that really going to benefit somebody? Is that going to help somebody learn something? And you forget, I guess, when you're early career, especially in a sales role, that this is all new when you're at that part of the journey. And I think it's a good way, it's a good reminder that you can really help people sometimes with what we think is maybe the simplest concept, but it can add value. So if you can put up with the banter between Mike and I sometimes, every once in a while, there's a nugget in there that if it helps somebody, and that's the only reason we do it is to get some thinking out there and give people access to people that love podcasts. It's a great way for us to share knowledge without being overtly marketing and trying to sell people that, it's not about that. It's just about how can we help people out?
Well, and I think you just hit on a key concept, and that's that the simplest element is typically the most powerful. That has been true in training, in coaching, and in the podcast. So oftentimes we do think that we overthink it, right? We live it too much.
Yeah, you can't reduce complexity by adding more things to it. You've got to
right, true.
Start taking away.
Right.
So tell us about the name. Like, how did you guys come up with the name? What's the backstory there?
Oh, that came out of one of our conversations. We were trying to figure out what the name was going to be. And, one of the things that is really a common thread between the way Christy and I both sell is understanding why your customers buy. So what is the why behind their buy? And I think that's where it was like, so the why and the buy. Yeah, that's it. Right. Yeah. And so then we had a name, and it was like, all right, this is cool. And then, so what does that mean? And so, we close all of our episodes with, if you know your whys, then your hows and your whats get much better. And it's a reference to Simon Sinek and the Golden Circle and things, even though that's not his idea. He does a brilliant job of getting it out there and explaining the message so that it resonates with more people. But those kinds of ideas have been around. They're fundamental. And I think that underscores what what you guys were just saying. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated in order to be impactful. Every expert out there is so micro-focused now on techniques and tactics. And this is how you use this tool this way. And here's umpteen ways to next Sunday to how to get this thing done. But if people don't understand the fundamentals, if they don't understand the foundational principles behind why that stuff works, then there's no mastery of it. And you've got mastery of a tool or a technique, but you don't have the fundamental basis for why something like that works. So when that tool or technique changes, when Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, when they change their algorithm, now you're hosed. Now you got to go back to the drawing board, and you're constantly spinning your wheels. Well, what are you trying to do? Well, I'm just trying to connect with people. Oh, so should I be broadcasting my message and advertising it to anybody who can hear it as often as possible so that most people just see me all the time and are annoyed by me, which is really what happens? Or do I say a few things, see who responds, and then engage with them? And that's what I liked about some of the Twitter chats that you and I saw each other on, Mike, is that I saw you as someone who was putting really thoughtful, insightful commentary out there. And when I liked it or when I disagreed with it, I said something to you. And then here we are on each other's podcasts in the same week. And there's something that's really good that has come out of it because we've found some common threads. And now we're in a position where we're kind of forming our own tribe, if you will, of we've got a lot of commonality in the thought processes between the four of us here and the fifth, even with you, Jody, but among us who kind of work with salespeople every day. And that's something that we can build on. And that's where these communities come from. And that's what social media is for. Look, you guys are out there in Phoenix. Christy's out there in Atlanta. I've been in the same room at the same time as Christy twice in the almost 2 years that we've known each other. But we talk to each other at least weekly. And we've got this thing that we're building based on our commonalities. And when you understand those, the foundation is in connection, not in whatever tactic, is being done or advertised right now. I think you're just set up so much better to be successful in anything you do when you can understand the why.
Yeah, well, and I think that resonates in a huge way with most of the clients that I have in my business. Everyone seems to struggle with this. How do I describe what it is I do or want to do? So if you're looking for a job, what is it that you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? What is it? Everybody describes it in terms of widgets and these tangible elements. They lose sight of that purpose behind what gets you up in the morning, right? And I can tell you from experience, I have sold when I was passionate about what I was doing, and I have sold when I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. And there is such a marked difference in the level of success when I was really tapped into that life purpose and it supported my value system. And even more so today, by creating a business that is strictly built on my value system, nothing more. And there are so few people who have really tapped into that element. And it shows in the confusion that we have in our culture. It shows in the confusion that you see even in the social media streams and those that are trying to be thought leaders and are just people with a megaphone, right? So they're not saying anything of substance. They're just saying stuff. So the why was really powerful for me to be able to bring that into the conversation on a daily basis.
It's amazing how many people get sucked into the idea of trying to find that next silver bullet. And that's what those experts are preying on, is this idea that, hey, there is this silver bullet that's going to impact your success. It's going to drive things forward. It's going to do whatever it is that you want to do. And really, those silver bullets are the foundational skills, like you guys have talked about. It's understanding your customer. It's asking questions. It's being naturally inquisitive. It's naturally curious about what they're doing. It's about being passionate about that product or service that you deliver into the marketplace, that thing that you do, and helping the customer connect the dots between the problems that they have inside their organization and how this thing is going to solve it, or helping them connect with others who may have a better solution. And I think that just gets lost over and over again. If people would spend more time focusing on the fundamentals than looking for that next silver bullet, that next quick fix, they'd be a heck of a lot more successul than they are today.
Yeah. Well, when I think about the why, that was a good introduction and is very, very similar to our thinking in that, we say sales is it's a thinking process. And when I think about asking the question why, it's not like that 2-year-old that has discovered that they can push that button and ask why, right?
Thank God, right?
But, we laugh about that, but I'll tell you, because I've been in this industry for a long time, I've been to plenty of sales training seminars. I've looked at content, and there are times when that's what we want to teach salespeople. And they don't internalize the why behind the why. They just think, well, I should ask why all the time. And they do sound like that 2-year-old that's driving people crazy, asking why. The why question to me is also, it's an internal question you should be asking yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Why did I just hear that objection? Why? But you process that internally. You don't just, well, why? Because you do end up just frustrating the heck out of people you communicate with. But having that discipline, it makes so much sense, right? It's one of those simple things. Just pause. As sales professionals, a lot of times we just want to get the message out. We want to give our pitch. We want to give information, give, and then they'll absorb it and then come back to me with all these ideas of how we can work together. And it's like, if you could just pause a second and just ask yourself, why is that? Why am I hearing that question right now? Why do they have that problem? How does that impact their customers? It's a thinking process, and it's not just asking why. So
it's amazing what happens when you slow down.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the thing about the 2-year-old asking why is the 2-year-old's got a genuine intention behind asking why. Like after a while, they figure out they can push that button. But those original questions, the 5 whys exercise comes from a place where you can get to the root of the actual problem. And so, or the situation, even if it's not a problem, what is it that is really driving all of this? And when you can get to the foundation of what someone's motive is, then you can address the real problems. Because just throwing a bunch of information out there and calling it value, I love this. All the stuff online about, well, you've got to give your prospect value first. You've got to put the value out there, value. And then you say, okay, you respond to that tweet and say, okay, so what does that mean? And then there are crickets because no one can tell you. Well, okay, so you clearly just copied and pasted that from your thought leader du jour and thought that was going to be the banner that you were going to carry. You don't actually understand what is underlying that. When you do, you're going to be a heck of a lot more successful. So stopping, slowing down. What am I actually trying to do here? there's so much of that isn't being done. And if we would just allow ourselves to not get caught up in the commotion and the noise and all of the confusion that's out there, because everybody's got a great idea. It's not that the ideas out there aren't great. It's just that how do you do them all? Well, you can't. So let's understand, again, what are we trying to do here? When we know what we're trying to do here, then we can take next steps in order to actually do it. But, oh, you don't understand, Bajorek, I got a number to hit. I need to hit that number right now. Like, okay, well, what if you missed the number right now, but hit all of the rest of them forever? What would that do for you?
Right.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people get put in that position, right? I mean, there are so many sales leaders too that are just so driven, and it trickles down, right? You've got a CEO telling you, look, you've got objectives you've got to hit. That trickles down into KPIs and metrics for your sales reps. And all they hear all day is you're not doing enough of this or enough of that. And it's all activity vanity metrics. And you might find a way to squeeze one out one quarter, but to your point, that's insanity, right? Every quarter having to pull out all the stops to try and hit a number. And it's such an unpredictable way to trying to manage a book of business or manage a sales career that, yeah, you'll definitely go crazy.
Well, and I think it's important too that, asking the why and understanding your value system isn't an excuse for not performing. A lot of times we'll find people that will kind of get stuck in the philosophical and not get down to the tactical. And so there's a why in the tactical as well, right? So what I love about the question why is that it is so multi-layered. There is why do I do what I do? And the how behind that is how does that add to my quality of life and the quality of the life of my family and those that I love. There is the why does my customer care? Why does the person who doesn't know me care? Why would they be interested? Why does my company exist? Right? So there's a whole host of things that come into play when you think about really start dissecting that word why. And especially if you start looking at this concept of individuals and organizations that can truly be servant leaders in their market, right? So, as a servant leader, you don't have to manage a sales team, right? But being a leader isn't about having the power. It's about knowing how to empower other people to find the answers to these questions. And so there's a whole host of, we could spend days and days talking about the philosophical aspects of this. But I think what's really important, and I think what resonates probably with our audience as much as anything, is that we don't stop there, because we recognize you cannot pay the mortgage with a philosophical argument, right? You actually have to get some stuff done, right? So you got to understand the buy behind the why, right?
No, and for anybody that's curious out there, podcasting will not pay the mortgage.
No, it will not. It will cost you money.
It pays Jody's mortgage, right?
There's 20% of this group that would disagree with you.
People like Jody, that's because this is not the career for me.
No, I wouldn't have to want to deal with Mike and I all the time. No way.
Not at all.
Well, it's funny, on that fundamental level, one of the first questions that salespeople that I work with is, okay, so exactly what is it you say you do around here? And it's kind of that old line from Office Space. I'm like, well, wait a second, what do you mean? And I'm like, no, what do you do? Why do you exist? Why does your role exist? And what do you do every day? Well, I sell stuff. Oh, okay, that, but let's dig a little deeper. And ultimately, you typically come to some description, regardless of the industry, regardless of the role, that it's either a service-based role or it's an educational role or it is something along the lines of understanding needs and delivering solutions. It's not about telling you all about the latest product. When the latest product comes out, you have a new way to service a need or a new solution that you didn't have before that is going to help the customer achieve an outcome that was not possible before that or you, or hopefully both, came off. And that in itself is a different fundamental understanding of what sales is. Because we were all taught, we're all of a certain age, we were taught that, a salesperson is someone who goes around and tells you something that you have to have right now and then does everything they can to get you to walk away with it in exchange for some money. And that is certainly one of the ways the economic world goes around, but that's not the way it's done anymore. And so we almost always need to get back to basics so that we can start to formulate our own impressions and understandings of what the sales role entails, so that we can get away from those old superstitions that don't apply anymore. Because so many people get caught in those superstitions and then they're stuck and they don't realize they're going down the wrong path before they get halfway down it. And I don't know how many times people are like, well, I'm just trying to get this prospect out for dinner. I'm just trying to get this prospect out for a round of golf or drinks. I'm like, you haven't earned the right to ask for that kind of a commitment yet. Sales is not all about golf and dinner and drinks. Try asking them a question about themselves first before you offer to have them, commit 6 hours of their time on a Saturday with you. Like, give me a break. It's not how it works anymore.
Yeah.
Well, and you get those instances where people will say, oh, I just need to refine my pitch. I just need to refine my pitch. Okay, you've got to think through that. So Jeff, you're laughing. Let's say someone comes up to you and says, hey, I just need to refine my pitch. What's your response?
Well, I mean, what are you pitching? To whom are you pitching? Why does it matter to them? Or have you even thought about that? Have you walked a mile in their shoes? Would you want to hear your pitch? That's the thing. And it's not because your pitch isn't good. Is your pitch even appropriate? It's not about your pitch. I just, that's a rant maybe for another day.
Yeah. Well, it runs into, not to feed the fire here, but it runs into something that's very focused on the individual sales rep or very focused on the organization. It has nothing to do with the customer, or rarely has anything to do with the customer. Some of them get designed a little better, but Christy, do you want to push Jeff's buttons here a little bit? Really
Absolutely.
That's why she doesn't go in the same room as him.
That's right. Only once a year. That's all we can handle, right?
Yeah, Simmons and I, like every week, they're onto something here with the strategy.
I'm ready to go like once a month, maybe once a quarter.
Nice.
Maybe we should try that.
I've got a video on my YouTube channel. It's called Don't Be So Selfish. And that's exactly what it is. It's all of these pitches and the pitches and the numbers and everything. It's all about the salesperson. And let's think about this. I think the two most important qualities of a salesperson are empathy and listening. And neither one of those is involved in a pitch until you listen with empathy. Then you can tailor your pitch. You've got to make a value statement at some point. There's a reason why you're valuable in the relationship and why you want that relationship to take the next step. That's what a pitch essentially is. But pitches have been boiled down over the years to something about, this is all about what I have, and don't you wish you had it, and you need it, and you just don't know it yet. So let me tell you. And that's why people get louder and louder and more frequent with their messaging. It's like, why would someone buy it? And why wouldn't someone buy it? And when you consider those things, the pitch changes a lot. And so it's not about having a great pitch. It's about having a pitch that can be worked and modified and is malleable and can be tailored appropriately to the needs of the person who is hopefully still listening to you by the time you get a chance to deliver it. And if you want to be interesting, you have to first be interested. And that's where the selling part comes in, because there aren't enough interesting people out there.
Yeah, it's such a hard pattern to break. I mean, a lot of the work that we do with customers or with our clients is focused on that exact problem of the need to pitch versus the need to understand the problem you're solving. And the pipeline, inevitably, when we look at, and this is across the board pretty consistently, is there's a lot of pitch activity, and then there's a lot of follow-up after the pitch to see why they did or did not move forward. And it's a hard discipline to break. And we've done this multiple times now with clients where we say, no more proposals going out the door until we've done these things, until you can answer these questions, and until we know the why behind a lot of why they would even want to look at a presentation or a pitch from us. That's what we're going to do now. And at first it drives them nuts because they feel like, well, wait a second, we don't have any proposals going out the door today, so that means we're not going to close any business. And it's like, well, okay, but right now you're closing 1 out of 15 proposals you have going out the door. So how many proposals do you want to write that come back with a no? Wouldn't you rather spend a little more time in the front of this process, understand the problem you're solving, and understand how you're going to impact this person's role or business or what have you, and send a proposal out the door and know that it's going to come back? It's a tough discipline to introduce into a company that has that culture of pitch, 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 pitch.
Mm-hmm. And it's a short-term focused, right? So, I mean, what you just described and the way that I look at pitches versus value statements, and it is important to craft a good, crisp value statement so that people get a sense of what you do and the value that you bring to the table. If you're doing a quick introduction, that's not a pitch. But pitches are all about the short-term gain, right? There's an ultimate objective. And if you haven't had conversations before you get there, then 14 of those 15 that you just mentioned that said no, you can't go back. You can't go back and repitch that until a certain amount of time has gone on. So that short-term focus is really one of the biggest challenges, and especially in a small business, because, hey, cash is king, right? I mean, it's hard to think about foregoing the short term for the long-term impact. Mm-hmm. But it is the secret to building a lasting business.
It's funny, you make the pitch and then you're in this endless loop of follow-up. And, there are people I call fact checkers and well-wishers. I'm just checking in to see how things are going. I hope this finds you well. That's the beginning of like 80% of every follow-up email that is ever sent, or phone call or whatever. And it's like, really? You're checking in? Who's that benefit? Well, dude, that's selfish. You're checking in because you want to know. If they wanted to know, they'd have called. If you were compelling enough in your initial communications or even the third or fourth meeting, there should be no need to check in. Why didn't you have a meeting scheduled already to go over this? I hope this finds you well. Wow, you really haven't talked to this person in a long time, have you? Huh. Well, how generous of you to check in on them to make sure that they're still okay. Like
a wellness check.
Yes.
Well, and you get a lot of those like quarter end. Like we just wrapped up a quarter, right?
Yeah.
And one of the projects I'm working on right now, one of the ideas that was floated around came from the CFO, is like, we need to do a check-in with everything we have a proposal out on. Let's do a check-in and see if we can get it closed by Friday. I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. No, I don't like doing the check-ins. And if I didn't know, if I've forecast that this is going to close in the fourth quarter and we need to make a third quarter number, my need to sell is not going to outweigh their need to buy. Right. And all we're going to do is antagonize people and fit that stereotype where now when I do call for a reason and want to have a conversation, they may not pick up the phone because they feel like, oh, he's checking in again. I don't want to go through that awkward dance of him just doing a howdy call. It's the short-term gain thing gets the best of us sometimes, I think, and it drives buyers nuts.
It does. I don't know how many times I've been complimented for being the same salesman on the 29th as I was on the 9th.
Right.
And
exactly.
that's when I knew I was on the right track. And I get that pressure all the time. Hey, can you pull any rabbits out of a hat this month? I'm like,
right.
No,
I can't.
That's amazing.
No, but on the 7th of next month, I've got this coming in, and on the 13th, I've got this. So I'll tell you what, why don't you book me as the steady guy and Rabbit Master, go bug them. But
why don't we just set the terms of our relationship where you will always know what you can get out of me, and I will never tell you anything otherwise. You're going to get it. You're going to get everything I tell you. You may get a little bit more every once in a while because sometimes things happen. And you're doing the right thing when your customer voluntarily orders more from you at the end of the quarter than you even asked for because they know it's the end of your quarter. And here's the thing, it's the end of their quarter too. So for you to ask them to spend money while their boss is asking them to save money, it's not a good thing. You're going to get what they can get you if you've earned the trust to ask for that. And
so there were two key elements there, and I will speak from a previous sales management perspective, right? And the key element there is that you've been a steady, consistent contributor, right? You're not sitting in a valley trying to close up your quarter in the third month, and you have done everything that you said you were going to do. So as a sales leader, I'm not sitting there thinking, okay, you are only going to step this up and really make those closing calls if I push you, right? And there's a whole generation of salespeople that have grown up in this. I push in the third month of the quarter because that's what my sales leader has pushed me to do. And there's so much that comes into the company culture, plays into that. The level of player coach mentality that sits with that sales leader plays into that. And then ultimately the consistency or lack thereof of the performance of that salesperson plays into that. So there's so many elements that are in play. And I'm always cautious. So you'll see me do this often, where I'm like, we're not suggesting that everything is kosher, everything's just this wonderful culture, everything works perfectly, and no one has to work too hard at the end of the quarter to close their numbers. You still got to meet your numbers, right? You still have to perform. in order to do this. But if you can think long term, really get out of that short term mindset and establish your system so that you're not in a position where you have to make catch up in the third month of that quarter. That's where this is of value.
A couple of things that you hit on there. One of the really big ones is just setting expectations and communicating properly inside your team and setting those expectations both up and down inside the organization and with your customers. The other one that jumps out at me is I can't think of a situation where I was buying something and I haven't gotten the lowest price that the sales rep offered me. Even if they've told me, hey, you need to get this thing done by the 30th of September because that's when our year ends. And the follow-up question, the first week in October or second week of October, if that's when it comes up, is usually, well, hey, this was a price that you were willing to give me at that point in time. What's changed? And if the only thing that's changed is time, and time is not part of the value of the service that I'm getting, then not a lot's changed.
Yep, that's exactly right. We've all been there. I mean, it's amazing, but and companies do it every single quarter, right? They just did it in September. They were all offering an extra 5%. You get that deal in.
Well, Jeff and Christy, this has been too good. You two are fantastic. It's been so great to have you on the show, but unfortunately, we've got to start wrapping up. But if you enjoy this conversation between Mike and Jeff and Christy, there's an opportunity for more, because Mike and Mike will be appearing on the Why and Buy podcast. This has been such a good conversation. I am looking forward to that one for sure. Christy and Jeff, tell us where we can find out more about you, what you're up to, and listen to episodes of your podcast.
You can find us at thewhyandthebuy.com and wherever fine podcasts are sold. I stole that line from another podcast, so I'm probably going to hear about it. But yeah, I mean, I'm at jeffbajorek.com. You can find me on Twitter at Jeff Bajorek. I'm on LinkedIn. If you would like to connect with me, please do. Just please give me a reason and say, hey, look, Jeff, I heard you on the Catalyst Sale podcast. Really like what you're up to. Would love to be connected. That's all it takes for me. Just a little bit of effort. But Christy, where are you at these days?
Yeah, so of course, thewhyandthebuy.com as well, and Walters Christy on Twitter, and ChristyWalters.com on the World Wide Web.
Wonderful. Thank you. I look forward to connecting with you and checking out more of what you're up to. So thank you so much, Jeff and Christy, and thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast.